Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Pitlane Punters podcast for your week. 2 episodes in a week. It's a crazy thought, but there's some pretty big news to dive into, and that is the 2025 calendar announcement, along with the formats of how the year is going to work. With me on the podcast, as always, is Joshua Grock, and our special guest is Zach Dowdell, who is going to give us all the information that we need to know about how next year will work. But Josh, firstly, do you want to run us through what the calendar is going to look like next year?
I just accidentally closed it on my screen, but I'm getting it back.
Well, I can start us off. I know we're going to Sydney at the start of the year in about towards the back end of February. Then we duck down to the Grand Prix, where it's been announced we'll have a fan-activated pit lane or pit paddock area, which will be good because that was something that was sorely missed this year. And then from there, we head across the ditch to New Zealand. And then after New Zealand, we head down to Tasmania. That comes back into its earlier slot in the calendar.
Or the pork chop, as it was seen in a Supercars social media video very recently. Then we head west over to Perth, and then the Darwin Triple Crown in the end of June, which is super exciting. We keep the northern circuits going with Townsville in July, and then the return. I think this is a pretty popular fan favorite return of Ipswich, the Paperclip, mid-August as well. A good return. I think we've been wanting the Ipswich Raceway or the Paperclip to come back.
Raceway.
Queensland
Raceway. A lot
Raceway.
of money back into the facility, and it's it's a much nicer visual appeal, and the facilities now with the new pit building that Tony Quinn's put in is a lot more suited to Supercars teams.
And the Sandown 500 has been replaced with the Bend. The Bend is taking over the pre-Bathurst Enduro round, I should say.
But we don't lose the Sandown 500.
I think we lose the Sandown 500, but it's a sprint round, isn't it?
Well, I think Zach's going to fill us in a bit later on the format of it, but Sandown still remains on the calendar. That'll slot in after the Gold Coast, but we'll have our Bathurst after the Bend endurance event. Then we'll head north to the Gold Coast for what is set to be a wild street party, as it always is. And then to finish the year, we'll head back down to Victoria to Sandown and then across to South Australia for the second time in the year and finish it off with the Adelaide 500, which will be pretty exciting with the way the formats are all going to work next year.
And it's quite a condensed second half of the season by the looks of it, which should be pretty exciting. Only got a race every 2 weeks.
Yeah, plenty of travel involved in that, and I'm sure, well, the teams have all signed off on it, so they're obviously all happy to do it. And expanded calendar for us next year with 13 rounds instead of 12, and
not quite 15. They still need more, but it's a good step in the right direction.
It is a step in the right direction, and the Super 2 calendar has also then since been confirmed as well, where they'll head to Sydney, Tasmania. I'm going off the top of my head here, Josh, so you might need to help me out. Sydney, Tasmania. They're doing Queensland Raceway. Sydney, Tasmania, Townsville, Queensland Raceway,
Bathurst and
Adelaide. I knew I'd get there eventually.
And no Victorian circuits, I think we talked about earlier on in the chat. Yeah,
we did, which is a bit of an interesting one for me. But hey, they like to change it up a bit for the Super 2 calendar. And unlike the past few years, the teams won't have to make the big journey all the way west to WA, which I think might help boost the grid a bit, knowing that they don't have to do the big trip across the Nullarbor. But we're going to bring in our special guest. Well, not really special guest. He normally hosts the show, but
he's special.
He's special because he's the man on the inside with all the information to help us break down how the formats will work for the 2025 Supercars calendar. Zach, come in and please inform us as to how the next calendar year will play out for the Supercars Championship.
Yes, good evening, boys. Josh, I've just realised I've made a terrible mistake here to put this up on YouTube at all. So have fun editing that.
Well, it was blurred, so you got a blurred background, mate. You're all right.
Oh, excellent.
It's not for kids.
No. What a start. It was a chaotic start, boys, but I can fill in some of the blanks. So yes, you did get all the rounds correct. I can fill in the dates. So February 21 to 23, season opener is the Sydney 500, 3 races at Sydney, and the season is going to start with a Friday night 100-kilometre sprint race, which is going to be very, very exciting. And then 200k races on the Saturday and the Sunday as well. Then
We've been very vocal on that on the podcast about that, haven't we? About having a Friday night. If they're doing the night, is it a night at night?
Yes. So the Friday and the Saturday are twilight races. So as close to nighttime as you'll get. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm really keen for the Friday night thing in particular because you're away from the footy codes.
Yes.
It's prime time to get eyeballs on the sport. And yeah, I think that's going to be really cool. And we saw the 200k races. They were great this year as well, with the mix between the 1 and the 2 stop strategy. So yeah, that's going to be really exciting. A compulsory pit stop on the Friday night race as well for the 100k, and 2 compulsory pit stops for the 2 remaining races on the Saturday and the Sunday. Then Albert Park Australian Grand Prix, just like we saw this year, 4 sprint races with no pit stops. So proper old school sprint racing, kind of like the I guess what a lot of people call the glory days of Australian touring car V8 supercar racing back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then over to Topor, and this is where we see the revitalized sprint format for next year. So of course this year the sprint format's been 2 55-ish minute races, so less than 2 hours of racing and a heck of a lot of practice, which I know you've been very vocal about, Josh. So that's now going to change to be 2 120k sprint races on the Saturday and a 200k fueling race on the Sunday. So that's going to be in place at all of the sprint events, and it's going to have the designation of the Super 440 because it's 440 k's of racing across the weekend. So one of the big things about this calendar, there's going to be a ton more racing this year. I think something in the range of about 1,500 more racing kilometres this year as opposed to next year, I should say, as opposed to this year. So there's going to be a lot of racing action across the season. That is for sure. An additional 1,200 k's of racing next year on this year.
36 races too, is it not, for the season duration?
34 races. So 34 races, which is 10 more than we have this year. So yes, it's only one more event, but I guess sort of part in the release strategy of having the events and then the formats, and we're going to dive into it a lot more because trust me, there is a lot more changes going on in supercars than just the sprint format. But yeah, 10 more races across with only just one more event. Fans are going to get a lot more bang for their buck next year. And basically Friday has just become a practice day apart from the Sydney season opener, and also the Adelaide season finale. That's going to become a 3-race format as well, with a Friday afternoon sprint race of 100 kilometres and then the traditional 250k races on the Saturday and Sunday for what's going to be renamed the Velo Adelaide 600.
I like it. I like it a lot. I like these Friday afternoon races. I think they're quite crowd and TV friendly.
Yeah, definitely. Sydney and Adelaide are the only events with these Friday races. But again, to sort of have it top and tail of the season, and as we're going to touch on soon, Adelaide, there's going to be very much a grand final feel to Adelaide. So the more racing we get for Adelaide, the more opportunity for a bit of championship for championship implications to unfold on the streets of Adelaide, where we know anything can and will happen.
For sure. Sure. I'm really excited. So, hey, where are we up to in the season? We're about 3 or 4 rounds in.
Yeah, so Topor, as I said, is the first of the Super 440s, as are Tasmania and Perth. They're also Super 440s. Ditto Darwin as well. That's another Super 440, but it also has the Triple Crown moniker, as is tradition. Townsville, that is also going to be a 500 race, a 500. But once again, 3 races at Townsville, back to 200k races and a 100k sprint. So not quite a super, well, not a super 440, but again, a different looking Townsville 500, and that sprint race is going to be on the Saturday as well.
Answered our question. So it's going to be the sprint in the Saturday morning.
Yep,
and
sprint early, and then 200k later on in the day.
Where do they fit qualifying? Or TBA?
Qualifying is going to be on the Saturday as well. So very busy Saturday. As it's currently scheduled.
You're going to buy a ticket to Townsville. Saturday's the day to go, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. And I should also mention for the sprint events, 2 30-minute practice sessions on the Friday at each of the sprint events. From Townsville, then it's the Ipswich Super 440, and then the Bend 500. Much like we saw at Sandown this year, you got extra practice for extra drivers, and of course, with it being an enduro, qualifying in the top 10 shootout, and then 101 laps of the Bend Motorsport Park on the Sunday. The Repco Bathurst 1000, which we all know and love. I should also mention this is where things get very, very different in Supercars land compared to what everyone is used to.
Before we go down that path, what layout are they using at the Bend?
The international layout. So the one Supercars has always used, and the one that's most predominantly used. So the one with the is it the triple or quadruple right-hander around the back of the circuit? So not the full-blown 7.7k GT circuit, which would probably be like a 2.5-minute lap and not a very good watch, frankly. But the one that Supercars have raced on, save for the COVID doubleheader where they ran the international and the West circuit as well, the shorter bull ring version that was used earlier this year by the Shannon Speed Series. You're on mute again, Anthony.
I've done it again. No, we just
You're better than that, mate.
As a host, I should be better than that. But with the Bend 500 and the Bathurst 1000, I do believe that, Zach, we are seeing the return of the Enduro Cup.
Yes.
As an official championship part of the year.
Yes, the Enduro Cup is back, and it is one of, I guess, 3 segments of the season, which is going to be a very different look for Supercars in season 2025. So all the sprint rounds prior to the Enduros at the Bend and Repco, they're going to make up a Sprint Cup for Supercars, and it's all part of. It all leads into the third and final segment of the Supercars championship season in 2025, and it is quite possibly the biggest change to Australian touring car racing from a regulations point of view, or a rules and regulations and point score point of view, since the championship changed from a single race event to a multi-round championship series in 1969. Supercars is implementing a final series for the first time in its history. So we've spoken a lot on this podcast, Josh, about NASCAR and their playoffs. This is the Aussie way to do it. Inspired by NASCAR playoffs, I guess you can say, but very much an Australian twist, hence why it's called finals. AFL, NRL, they have their grand finals. It all comes down to the final round kind of thing. And we've seen that in Supercars in the past few years, in particular with the reigns of Scotty McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen. Sort of their dominance has allowed them to wrap up championships very early into the season. And even if you go back further, Jamie Whincup wrapped up seasons early. Mark Skaife wrapped up seasons ridiculously early at the HRT back in the early 2000s. This eliminates that. Every year, it's going to come down to the final round, and more likely than not, it's going to come down to the final race, which is going to keep eyeballs drawn to the sport. It's going to keep storylines flowing. can you argue it's artificial? Yes, to a point, but let me stress this: it is going to be done differently to the NASCAR playoffs. It's not win and you're in like it is in NASCAR, where you just got to start every race and you can run last every week. But if you somehow get a win out of the clouds one week, you're in with a championship shot. The top 10 in points at the conclusion of the Bathurst 1000, they are locked in to the finals, and they are the only 10 drivers who can contest for a championship across the final 3 rounds at the Gold Coast, Sandown, and Adelaide. However, the Enduro Cup and Sprint Cup winners, they get automatic entries into the playoffs now, or into the finals, I should say. So, in saying that, they're probably going to feature in the top 10 in the championship anyway. So you're not likely going to see someone jump out from the clouds, unless, say, they're, if anything, they'll probably be like 11th, 12th in the championship. But yeah, in saying that, also, there's a point system for the finals in Supercars. So at the conclusion of the Repco Bathurst 1000, the top 10 in the championship, they get their points reset to 3,000 points. And then based on where they are in the standings, they get a seeding rank. So first in the championship, they get 150 bonus points. Second gets 120 bonus points. Third gets 96, and it keeps on going down on a progressive scale. And 10th gets 21 bonus points on top of their 3,000 point reset. And then on top of that, the winner of the Enduro Cup and the Sprint Cup, they both get 25 bonus points. So you do get rewarded for your successes in the early part of the season.
Is there any bonus points for just regular race wins?
No, so it's not win and you're in like NASCAR. There's no bonus for any race win. The bonus for race wins comes in the finals, where it is if you win a race in any of the finals, then you're locked into the next round of the finals. So the way it works is that the top 10 are locked in for the Gold Coast. Then at the end of the Gold Coast round, the 3 lowest point scoring drivers, they get knocked out. Then it's the top 7 go through to Sandown. Then once again, the lowest 3 get chopped out then. And then you have a championship for the decider and the 3 races on the streets of Adelaide.
Yeah, right. So it'll be pretty exciting stuff. Are they getting fancy stickers like in NASCAR?
That I'm not sure of. Don't know that many details yet. I just know the formats, which I'm currently reading now.
Well, they only got announced today, so
yeah, exactly right. Yes, but yes, very lucky with the job that I have, that I get a little bit of an insight into these things before they get announced. And I guess you guys are lucky that you know me. But yeah,
friends in high places.
Exactly right. That I should also mention too, the points, they keep on getting reset at each round as well in the finals. So the 7 that go through, from the Gold Coast to the Sandown 500, which, as you mentioned, Anthony, the Sandown 500 stays, but it's like the old school Adelaide 500, where it's 250k races on the Saturday and the Sunday. So yes, the Sandown 500 moniker is kept, but instead of it being the 161k 2-driver race, it is now 2 81-lap single driver races with 2 compulsory pit stops.
Only 2 for that length.
Yes, only 2. So going back to what I was saying, at Sandown, the top 7 get reset to 4,000 points, and then once again, first seeding gets 150 bonus points, second seeding gets 120. Then it's 96, 78, 66, 57, and then 7th is on 48 points. Then once again, the top 2, the top 4 rather, they go through. The bottom 3, they get knocked out, and then at the end, it's 5,000 points reset for the top 4. Then it's 5,050 points for first seed, 5,030 points for the second seed, 5,015 points for the third seed, and then the fourth seed gets just stays on the base 5,000 points. So there will be differences based on prior successes, essentially. So it still does reward, I guess, how well you've performed in the early stages of the season. But in saying that, there's also nothing preventing, like, I guess, a football code sort of late season charge where you can sort of scrape your way into the finals then keep going on a big run towards the end of the season. So it really places an emphasis on maintaining your performance when it matters most, which is going to be really exciting.
100% for sure, especially when you look at, if we just take a look at our season, for example, 2024 season that we're currently in, and we've seen the form of James Golding and Nick Percat. Like, if they scrape into the 10 and they have a good end of the year, well, beauty, right? Or if you think of David Reynolds last year at Penrite, in the form he was in last year, he could have won a championship with that form, potentially. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way, and he didn't have a great Adelaide, or didn't win at Adelaide. But yeah, okay, righto. Because I mean, it sounds complicated when we just talk about it like this, though. But that's the advantage of this system, right? It opens up the door for some of these late charges.
Yeah, definitely. And although it sounds complicated when we're talking about it, jump on supercars.com. We have a bunch of content basically helping to explain it all and sort of presenting it all in written form. And also a little bit of a retrospective on what a classic season in the Supercars Championship would have looked like had the final system been implemented, which is a pretty cool thing to go back in history and look on. But yeah, it is going to be massively exciting. And I know in the past I haven't been the biggest fan of how NASCAR do their playoff system, shall we say, but I do prefer this way of doing a sort of finals or a playoff system, because I think it places much more of an emphasis on building an entire season as opposed to just, one lucky day where you might luck your way into a victory somewhere along the way.
And we've still got to remember too, for those of you listening at home, that it doesn't mean that by the time we get to Adelaide, it's not just 4 cars going around having a race. Everyone will still be there trying to go around for a race win and take victory. But ultimately, the finals part of the event will mean that those top 4 drivers, hopefully by Sunday, the highest person in the championship, or the highest person finishing on the racetrack, wins the decider on Sunday in Adelaide. That's the key, isn't it, Zach?
Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, as you said, like at the end of the Adelaide 500, it's not like win and you're locked in. It's the highest point scorer of those championship 4 at the conclusion of the Adelaide weekend is the champion. But like, yeah, as you said, like the drivers who got knocked out at the Gold Coast, they're still scrapping for 8th to 10th in the championship. The drivers who got knocked out at Sandown, they're still scrapping for 5th to 7th in the championship. And of course, everyone below that, they're still scrapping for best of the rest, 11th, back on down to 24. And they're still fighting for individual race wins. Like if a driver outside the finals, if they still win a race in that time, they're still going to go down in the history books as the winner of that race, regardless of their championship status. So yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot of people sort of don't realize at first, but just because there's 4 drivers going for a championship at Adelaide doesn't mean there's still going to be another 20 cars on. There won't be another 20 cars on track, keeping them honest.
How does this affect the team's championship? Because obviously those points get bumped up in each playoff section. How does that affect the teams?
Teams championship, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah,
to be honest, I think that it would just remain the same, and that they don't get reset. I think this is purely a drivers' championship that the points get reset.
Yeah.
Teams championship, it just remains the
As
traditional points.
Yeah.
The traditional point structure, I guess you could say, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure those questions will be answered further throughout today and the weekend as we release this on Wednesday.
Fingers crossed anyway, because that was just something that came to mind there, because there's a bit of emphasis on the teams. Is there even a reward? Do they pay teams champions like they do in Formula One?
I'm not.
Is there like a reward?
Heard, I don't think so, but again, that's I think that's above my pay grade a little bit.
Fair enough. Yeah.
To be honest, but
it's a bit off topic too, so sorry.
No, that's all good. I mean, but again, it's sort of exciting that we can get to talk about this as well. Very quickly, I should also mention, I haven't mentioned the exact structures of the finals series in terms of race formats and such in order. So Gold Coast 500, that's as it always has been, two 250k races on the Saturday and Sunday. Sandown 500, as I mentioned before, 250k races again, much like the Gold Coast. And then, as mentioned earlier, Anthony, it's not an Adelaide 500 next year; it's an Adelaide 600, an extra 100k of racing on the Friday, which is going to be really exciting. And then your traditional 250k races on the Saturday and Sunday. But that's the race formats. Plenty of changes to the qualifying formats as well, and another unique part of the sprint format for next year as well, which is really going to throw a hurdle and a spanner in the works at teams trying to set up cars for different compounds of tyres.
Does that mean we're going to see Parc Ferme come in to the qualifying procedures?
That is not something I'm aware of as well. Unfortunately. But yes, for the sprint races, the two races on the Saturday and the Sunday, the two sprint races, 120k races, they're going to be contested on two different compounds of tyre. So there's going to be a new construction of soft tyre that's going to be introduced, which is the tyre that's been tested, if you remember back to Sydney Motorsport Park.
Yeah.
So that tyre is being introduced. It's a new soft compound tyre. And there's also going to be a super soft tyre as well. So the two sprint races on the Saturday are going to be contested on those different tyres. And also the back-to-back qualifying sessions on the Saturday morning, they're going to be on the two different compounds of tyre as well. So I reckon that's going to be really exciting to watch as well, how teams adjust to those two different tyre compounds. And also to see if anyone sort of sacrifices anything on one compound of tyres in one session to sort of gain it all back in the next session. I reckon that's going to be really interesting to watch as well. Another thing with the qualifying formats as well, there's a new qualifying format for next year. So 3 qualifying formats are going to be used next year. There's Format 1, which is your traditional all cars on the track at the same time, fastest at the end claims pole. Yep. There's a new format, a new 2-part qualifying format, which is going to be one to watch. So there's the first part, all 24 cars are on track. At the end, for 10 minutes. At the end, the 14 slowest cars are eliminated. And then at the end, we've sort of got a somewhat top 10 shootout, but instead of all drivers going out one at a time, all the cars are going to be on track at the same time for 8 minutes. And then the fastest car is going to be on pole.
Kind of like the GT at the 12-hour.
Yes, a bit like the 12-hour qualifying, yep. And then the 3-part qualifying format, that's also received a little bit of a tweak. So part 1, as per usual, all 24 cars are on track. But this time, instead of 4 cars getting knocked out, 6 cars get knocked out. So we're left with 18 cars on track for part 2, at which point the 8 slowest cars get knocked out. And then after that, it's a top 10 shootout. So, yeah, a bit of a tweak there in that they sort of, it's a bit more cars get knocked out at the end of the first segment. So it's not, I don't know, it's a criticism sort of you and I have both had of the 3-part qualifying, is that sort of we don't think enough cars get knocked out at the point. And I think I've gone on record to say sort of 7 and 7 makes a lot of sense. I'll gladly cop 6 and 8 though, as opposed to 4 and 10.
Yeah, and Bathurst is keeping its same qualifying format as well.
Yep. Bathurst is as per usual. The
so
qualifying.
That's 4, is it? Is that 4 formats?
It's format 1, so all 4 cars. So all cars are on track, and then top 10 shootout. So it's it's sort of like its own thing, and it's the same for the enduro for the bend as well. The format 1, and then the top 10 shootout later on the Sunday. Bathurst Friday, format 1 on the Friday as per usual, and then on Saturday it is the top 10 shootout, which we all know and love.
Yeah, fantastic. I love it. It's quite a lot, quite a few changes. Hopefully it's not too difficult for the fans to wrap their heads around, because that's the only problem with some of these format changes sometimes is it's hard to get your head around. So hopefully the messaging is consistent.
No, for sure. And I mean, look, credit goes to Tim Edwards, head of motorsport at Supercars. He's come in and he's already done a lot in his rather short tenure at Supercars, and he's certainly not afraid to get things done either, like the AVL dyno testing, all the parity measures that we've seen in the off season, and also rolling on through this season as well. And like this is big stuff as well. Hopefully it attracts a new generation of fans to the sport. Who knows? Maybe it even attracts some fans from NASCAR as well. If it's good for them, why not watch some Australian racing as well? Because we're seeing a little bit of an Australian invasion or an Australasian invasion in NASCAR circles. And like the more internationalized we can get on the sport, that'll be a great thing.
This gives me a bit of Big Bash vibes. When Cricket Australia went towards Big Bash, T20 domestic, more action cricket, I guess. It's kind of giving me the final series, give me those sorts of vibes. Changing a traditional sport the way it's been done to something a little bit more adrenaline fueled. Excuse the pun.
Yeah, and we've seen the Big Bash thrive on that model over the years. So hopefully, for the sake of Supercars, that it's able to do the same thing because it's worked for them, and I can't wait to see how it all unfolds next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's exciting. Exciting time for the sport. Toyota coming in 2026. Now we've got this new exciting way to crown a champion, which it's not really something a lot of people. It's only really something NASCAR does in motor racing circles, and yes, it's controversial in NASCAR, but I also think, I also like the way that Supercars is going about it, because at the end of the day, we're not an American sporting culture, I guess you can say. Like, American sport is very, very different to Australian sport, I think. And I like that it's not just purely based on wins. I like that you got to build a season just to make the finals. Again, that feels like a very Australian sort of football code way to go about things. Like, even the A-League and soccer or football, the traditional European way to crown a champion is a season-long points tally, sort of like Supercars has done. But, even A-League does finals and grand finals. So, it sort of gets us in line a bit more with the Australian sporting landscape. And, look, I can't wait for the season opener next year in that SMP already. I think Friday night race to kick off the season. I hope we get a lot of fans out there, because that's going to be quite a spectacle. And 100K, good old sprint race. I like it. There's a lot to like about next year, I think.
100%, I agree. Love the night races on Friday.
Yeah, a bit of speedway about it.
Absolutely. Zach, thank you for enlightening us and our listeners with how that's going to work for next year. And boys, happy Bathurst week once again, and tune in across the weekend.
Yes, thank you, Anthony. And please do check out supercars.com. We've got plenty on there to help out all the fans and try to wrap their heads around this pretty seismic shift in the way Supercars does things across the season. So plenty on there to check out and read. I hope that it's I'm sure that it's going to be a bit of an adjustment for everyone initially, but I'm sure that come the Adelaide 600 at the end of the 2025 season, I'm sure that we're going to have a cracking championship finale between four of the very best racing drivers on the planet.
You've been listening to the Pitlane Punters podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and ring the notification bell wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get a spare chance, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us in the algorithm. And now, exclusive to Spotify listeners, we've unlocked the Q&A function. So if you have a question about the podcast, how we make it, or just have any motorsport questions in general, we'd love to hear from you, we'd love to answer them, and we'd love to engage with you. That's it from us. See you next time on the Pitlane Punters podcast.